All right, what's going on, everyone? Happy Friday. Welcome back to our third day of live Saber Sim build reviews here. My name's Jordan. I'm the head coach here at Saber Sim. If you are tuning into this for the first time, didn't catch the last two shows, this is a new form of content we're trialing out this week here. It seems to be successful so far. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback on this, so we'll probably be keeping this going forward, at least for a little while. I don't think this type of content is going to be going anywhere. May do a little bit with changing the format around, doing a few different things, but it seems like everybody's been enjoying it so far. I've been enjoying it on my side here. It's interesting to kind of see how people are applying the tools into their processes every night, provide a little bit of feedback on it here. So we've got 5 different folks to pull up here today, checking out some MLB builds from the last couple of days. What I am trying to do here is provide some actionable feedback that you can take with you and apply into your process in future slates. This is not me hopping on, looking at the slate yesterday and saying, oh, well, you certainly would have won a lot more money if you played the team that scored 10 runs, right? That's not what we're doing. I'm looking for things that jump out to me in your process based on what I'm seeing in the build, based on what I'm seeing in contest flashback results that you can do to take with you to improve things. So just to give you an idea of what a few of those things are, the things that I'm consistently looking for is first, people that are treating their entries, their bankroll, their investment into DFS as that investment portfolio. So that means diversification within your builds. That is something I'm seeing most people have down pretty pat. I haven't really had to call out on min uniques for too many here, but that also means playing a lot of lineups, right? We've had a few where a lot of focus on single entry, maybe just playing a couple lineups a night. We're jumping right into some of the higher stake stuff, right? I want to see that diversification in your contests as well. For some of you, that might also be diversifying in the form of the slates that you're playing, right? Especially if you're at that threshold where you can make that jump above the $3 entry fee on the main slate. I like to see some investments into some of the other side slates, decorrelating your investment in the slate across other smaller slates that aren't perfectly correlated to the main slate. If you are taking chances, gambles, leverage spots, applying your research, I want to see that that's done in a smart way. I want to see that, maybe there is a mind toward the actual player ownership, the pool exposure, not too many locked players, ideally, not a highly curated player pool, applying your research in an intelligent way here that kind of works with the rest of your portfolio. Want to see that you're staying on top of the news. It means building lineups when the starting lineups are out or close to lock, late swapping accordingly when it matters, and then limiting mistakes. And this can be like big, like, oh, this tool just isn't being used correctly, whether that's like a custom metric where the ranks and values are all mixed up, or a lineup rule that might be inadvertently breaking a build or something like that. But also kind of softer mistakes. Overthinking the DFS process is kind of one thing that I've come back to here a few times, where you might be overfitting your pool on accident. Or just overly restricting things here. I think that also fits into that category of a leak here. So we'll go ahead and get things started. As always, if there are questions in chat, if there are questions, you can post them in chat. I will do my best to keep up with things there, especially if I am reviewing your build and you have questions. There are things that I'm saying in a confusing way or that aren't totally making sense. That is the right place to do it. If you would like to register, for lack of a better word here, for the next build review, maybe even this afternoon. We have 5 to get through today. We might have time to sneak a couple more in there before the hour is up. So if you want your build reviewed, just drop your username for me in the chat. Actually, you know what's probably easier now that I'm thinking about it? Post in the Office Hours channel in Discord. It makes it a little bit easier for me to find who you are on SaberSim and then get your stuff pulled up. So post in the Office Hours channel in Discord if you want your build reviewed. If we don't get it today, it will happen on Monday. I think barring any unforeseen circumstances, this will pick right back up on Monday, the 5 o'clock Eastern time slot. So we won't be doing it this weekend here, but we'll pick it up on Monday. But let's go ahead and get into things here and start with the first one. This is Be More BZ, posted yesterday while we were on the live stream, and I wasn't able to get to this one. So we are going to kick things off starting right there. I see a few folks in chat already coming here to hang out on this Friday afternoon. So welcome everybody, and let's get things going. All right, pull up the slate here. I'll probably just poke around and see kind of where people last played. We started talking about the 23rd slate, the 24th slate. Ideally, if you played yesterday, it was a little bit of that early start. So if people didn't play yesterday, not a big deal. We'll go ahead and look at the 24th main slate. But for those that did appear to play yesterday's little slate, I will analyze that. I didn't get a chance to play this one. This one snuck up on me. I was all ready to register my entries right around 10 o'clock my time for the slates that day. And then I realized it was one of those early only days. We had the 2-game night slate yesterday, but I did miss out on this slate here. So if there's any particular context that I need to know about here, especially if there was a late swap situation, let me know in the chat because I ended up totally missing this one here. So, but let's take a look here. Starting off with the portfolio, what I would say is kind of a strong start to the portfolio here. Definitely looks like we're following the profit plan. A couple contests I would like to see. I guess we should take a look since this was a smaller slate and kind of see what the contest lobby looked like here before I start talking about it. Let's do less than or equal to that $3 range and just kind of see what was out here. So we did get into the mini max. We played the quarter jukebox, dumped an entry into the daily dollar, smaller than normal. Oh, here's actually the big solo shot. Yeah, so pretty good contest portfolio overall. A little heavy on the 20 max and 150 max contests. Again, those are great ways to cheaply get a ton of lineups in play. Very good contest to be playing. I think ones that we would recommend most of the time. I think the mini max can get a little bit of a bad rap. It is under that $3 threshold. Getting 150 lineups into the slate for $75 is pretty good. I would have probably liked to have seen a couple more of these single entry 3 max kind of contests under the $3 range show up in this portfolio here. Not a huge deal. I mentioned it the last couple days we've been doing this year that by no means am I saying like playing the $3 single entry or the $3 3 max are a skeleton key to DFS, that you will win them every single night. But when you look at these and you look at these kinds of contests, you generally have just ridiculously high possible ROIs that you can't get in other contests anywhere else in the lobby. You ought to be playing them. I would say they're probably better investments before jumping into the mini max at all. Looks like this user is kind of balancing their bankroll investment by not filling this mini max completely. So I assume there's some kind of bankroll calculation of like 108 lineups is what makes sense for me. $60 exactly. So 108 lineups is exactly what makes sense for me in this contest. If you're going to play $60 a night, I think some of that might be better served into some of those low stakes single entry and 3 max contests first, especially since you're only playing the one. So to reduce the number of lineups you can get into a little bit, but you'll have a higher potential to turn some of that money around more quickly. Minimax is a tough contest. It's a contest that's nice to get a lot of entries into quickly. You're just going to takes a little while to realize it in that contest. So yeah, I would get into some of those lower stakes single entry, but let's take a look overall at, did we process this contest well? We didn't. I apologize. This has been going on for some time now, and it's annoying me as just as much as I'm sure it's annoying you guys. We are working on a fix here to some of these contests not processing well. It like kind of gets stuck in that indefinite current winnings. So we're working on that here. But let's take a look at the sim ROI here. So a decent sim ROI, positive is always good. This looks like a slate where it was like, well, first of all, quarter jukebox is a 5% to first contest. The ceiling of what is possible in that contest in terms of ROI is always going to be a little bit lower. So we are seeing that here in the top of ROIs by the 20 maxers, but we're positive. That's a good sign here. There is some natural noise that happens with your sim ROIs overall. Sometimes you'll be up a little higher. Sometimes you'll be down a little lower. Always good to see a positive sim ROI here at the very least. I would say my hit rate overall this season on positive slates for sim ROI is about 75, 80%. So that's kind of a rough target that you can keep in mind here, but good to see that positive sim ROI. I would have loved to have seen your sim ROI in the mini max here. And fortunately we can't here, but a positive ROI in the daily dollar as well. So that's always a good start. Let's actually go ahead and take a look at how we put the build together here. All right, cool. So what do we have here? We've got 1,500 lineups in the pool. Looks like a advanced plan user here. So an old grandfather plan. I haven't seen the 1,500 number in a little while. So kind of cool to see. Let's see. What else are we seeing? Right off the bat, seeing some adjusted uh, projections here, some adjusted team totals here. So let's take a look at what we're seeing. So we've got quite a bit of exposure to the San Diego stack. I'm going to reset this and just get an idea. So it looks like San Diego bumped up by almost a run, zero 0.8. Cleveland bumped up by a fair bit as well. So a few teams that were bumped up quite a bit in the team totals. I've actually been a little bit surprised to see how many people are using these team totals regularly. Certainly nothing wrong with that by any means. Definitely there to be used. I frankly didn't know that that was a feature that so many were using to apply their stance. So a couple things jump out to me looking at this right on the bat. I do like that min uniques was used here. We have 3 min uniques. It's good. It's going to help diversify your lineups. But if you're looking at this right out of the gate here, this is a pretty big stand on San Diego. 75% exposure to your top overall stack. If we look at the leverage column here, we are going to see a very big stand made on all of these San Diego players, right? We have clearly taken a big stand. We are diversifying a little bit with min uniques, but this is a large take. I think a couple things. This is not necessarily wrong to do across the board. But I think you should be aware of the level of risk that you are taking on here. The first level of risk that like kind of comes in here is obviously San Diego doesn't do well, then you don't end up having a very good slate, right? That's kind of obvious, and you're probably aware of that if you're already taking that stand. But the other kind of risk that can come in here is the inputs to what you were using to base your decision on end up being wrong, and you end up having this very fragile build, right? So San Diego looks like they were actually fairly chalky on this slate in against Washington in a friendly hitting park. I assume probably a pretty friendly hitting matchup. And maybe the stand was here even at these like medium ownerships here, or actually pretty high ownerships that they were coming in under owned. Well, you are now very fragile to that particular thing being different. And that is where a lot of times when I see somebody's sim ROI is very low, and your sim ROI was still positive here, so that's a good thing. But where somebody's sim ROI was exceptionally low for a given slate, and they go to check flashback and they're like, why is my sim ROI so low? A lot of times that ends up being because you were so heavily concentrated on a particular play or team or stack that was actually resting on that team's ownership coming in exactly as expected, and it didn't. And they ended up higher owned than expected, and that ended up crushing you. So I would say a couple things. One, if you are going to kind of use team totals to apply a stand you want to take, affect the projections in that way, I would probably have been a little bit more aggressive with the min uniques here. We could have very easily, and hopefully I didn't remove my ability to kind of like get the correct lineups that you had in your pool here. Oh, let me just say no. There we go. Okay, so that's back how it was, right? We could have probably bumped this up even a little bit higher, maybe gone to something like 5 min uniques. Let's see, did that actually do anything here? And we immediately see these exposures start to flatten out a little bit. If we hit over onto the leverage column here, actually, here's a good example. If we flip over to the leverage column, right, we can diversify up to the point where our basically put the min uniques as high as possible where our biggest stand is still the team we want to take the big stand. Right. So in this case, it actually only would have been one higher min unique. We would have gone from 3 to 4. But on the pro plan or the standard plan here, where you don't have the contest sims as a filter to kind of filter out unprofitable lineups, that's how I end up doing my process a lot. Is I will run the contest sim, filter out unprofitable lineups, and then pump min uniques to one less than the max. We don't really have that same ability here on standard, but what we can do is make min uniques as high as possible where our leverage column is still sorted in the order that makes sense to what we wanted to do on this slate. It is obvious to me that your stand, that you wanted to be overweight San Diego. That's fine. Great if that's where your research took you, but diversify up to the point where that is bared through here. So it seems like a subtle thing, right? Changing this from 3 to 4, but that actually has a pretty big impact on your overall exposures, gives you a little bit more diversification, makes your portfolio less fragile to an input to your decision making having been wrong. So Aaron says he was at 5, but running out of time. Yeah, no problem. I get it. Sometimes time constraints are a thing there, but that definitely stands out to me. The other thing too is um, point 0.8 runs is on the threshold of being a pretty big take for what it's worth. A little too big for my comfort. I don't Again, I think if your research is well founded, if it is data driven, like if data, whether that's being like an exploitative play or something that you don't think is being accounted for well in the Sims, that's all fine. That's a pretty big adjustment here. So I would be cognizant of that as well. When I have made team total adjustments in the past, and it is something I have used before to try to pump up my exposure to certain teams, I kind of think about the half run as like a soft cap to team totals. I like to have that basis of I think this could still plausibly be the true team total. And I start to think it's a little unlikely that the SaberSim Sims, even Vegas to some extent, are off by that much when you start talking about 0.8, 1.0 run total adjustments. Let's see what some of these others were. So we docked Texas by 0.3 runs. I think that's fine. The Cleveland. Okay, so it looks like Cleveland was actually a pretty big stand here as well, as was San Francisco, but maybe to a lesser extent. So like a few stands here taken with the team totals, which again is fine, but I would be careful of that magnitude of a team total adjustment. But otherwise, I mean, looks pretty good here. Let me see if anything else jumps out. Doesn't really look like a lot of lineup rules, default settings here. Min salary bumped up a tad. I've played around with this here this year as well. So Aaron says, I'm a ballpark pal member, so I lean on them for a few team leans. Hate to name drop. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. So for what it is worth, we are accounting for ballpark factors in the simulations. So if that is kind of the basis of the stand that is being taken, you should be aware that it is already captured in the simulation. So the way I think you could frame that in a way that is perfectly fine is maybe you think that the SaberSim simulations are not appropriately accounting for the ballpark factors for some of these parks or some of these games. But to me, that is more of a 0.2, 0.3 implied run total adjustment than a 0.8 implied total run adjustment, knowing that we are already doing that to some extent. Like when we say we think San Diego's implied run total is 5.2, that is knowing that it is in a good hitting park. So kind of a good thing to be aware of there. I think there are kind of two categories of adjustments that you're making from like a model standpoint, from almost a handicapping standpoint. There is the SaberSim is not accounting for this, of which there is not much, to be honest. But one of those big things that we have talked about a lot this week is literal postponement risk. We account for weather in the form of wind, temperature, humidity, that kind of thing, but postponement risk, that is not captured in the Sims. So I think you can be more heavy-handed in your adjustments trying to account for that. Park factors are accounted for in the Sims. So if you're going to make an adjustment, the claim there is really instead, I don't think the adjustment that the Sims are making here or that the way that the Sims are projecting this game is appropriate enough, but you should be more cautious with to the extent that you push that because we are accounting for it to some extent. So but looks like a pretty sound process overall. I would say takeaways here. You ought to play the free ROI low stakes single entries in addition to the daily dollar. Those $3 ones are pretty good. I know this was a 6-game early slate contest offerings, a little more limited than what is typically out there for like a main slate, but would have liked to have seen that. And I would say be cautious of the team total adjustments above maybe a half run or so, and be aware of the adjustments that you're making when you are adjusting for something that is at least theoretically already built into the sim. But otherwise, I mean, I think you are on the right track. And yeah, not a whole else jumping out to me on this one. That looks pretty good. Aaron also said using around 1.5 per slate, maybe 5 if I'm feeling it. Yeah, that's fine. I think you could probably, I mean, it's your bankroll and probably being on the more conservative side is better. But I think you could probably kind of bump that up a tad if you felt comfortable with it. On the flip side, if this is your general approach to building lineups, I actually let me flip that around. Knowing that you kind of built your entry, knowing that you played 1.5% of your bankroll on a slate where you took a very aggressive stand makes me feel more comfortable with your approach in general. I would say if you had played 5% of your bankroll on a slate and played this aggressively, I would say you are exposing yourself to a lot more risk in that way. So if you end up kind of taking maybe softer stands, then I think you could invest, and maybe that's actually almost a. You said play around 5% of your bankroll if you are feeling it. I would be careful on what that means, because if 5% of your bankroll on a slate where you're really feeling it means a slate where you are taking a really aggressive stand, you might actually almost have that backwards. Where I would say the slates where you really want to be aggressive and exploitative, you should probably invest less on the way to doing it, and on the slates where you're going to play more balanced and spread out, you can invest more on the way to doing it. So be careful of that too. But looks good. Let's keep it rolling. All right. Where am I? What am I doing? Lost my list here for a second. All right, Raph LP is up next. The one other thing I did want to mention here, before we get into this next one, is that when I am doing these reviews, I am going to kind of come at this from the standpoint of assuming that your goal is profit at all costs, for lack of a better word. That like bankroll growth and maximizing ROI is your goal. And that sounds kind of obvious. But I don't think that's 100% true at all times for all players on all slates, right? There, I play some slates where I'm taking it a little more casually. Maybe I'm intentionally sacrificing some perfect contest selection to take a couple shots because I want to. Or I'm doing something a little out of the ordinary and taking a stand on a particular team because my gut tells me to. And maybe it's a big stand, right? So I think for this to be most effective to everybody watching, whether I'm reviewing your build at that time or you're just watching along here, I'm going to approach this from the standpoint of like, no, first principles, this is what you should be doing. This is the right thing to be doing, but just be aware of that here. Like, you know, there's a little bit of a spectrum of that here from slate to slate. All right. RAF LP here. Let's get it pulled up. All right. Bounce over, take a look at the contest portfolio here. Looks pretty good. We see mostly invested into the lower stake stuff. I thought maybe Raf had mentioned that there was a specific slate that we wanted reviewed here. Maybe I don't see it. So I'm just going to keep rolling on this one. 24th. Okay. Had a feeling. Yesterday was not the process. Okay. 24th it is. All right. Okay, so we'll take a look at the contest selection here. We see, yeah, again, same deal. We're playing the low stakes, which is good. Solo shot, quarter jukebox, daily dollar. That's all looking good. Probably, yeah, I think that's fine. I maybe would play those $3 before even playing the solo shot. But kind of a minor nitpicky thing there. Probably would also play the $1 3 max. Again, just like very, let's see, just pretty beatable contests overall, but kind of a minor thing there. I just think they're worth playing. So depends a little bit on, I guess, like $30 overall. You're basically playing $1 into your single entry and 3 maxes right now. I would like to see like $8 maybe played into those, so you could probably work a couple more of those in. We talked a lot about the dime times throughout this week on other shows. They are perfectly fine to play. I think they can be nice as a way to get a lot of different lineups into play, especially if you are trying things out for the first time. They are deceptively hard. If we just take a look here and compare, let's see. The reason they are deceptively hard is because they end up being full of players that are just entering every single one of these that open as a way to get as much action down on the slate as possible. They are not very attractive to casual, more recreational players, which is where a lot of our ROI comes from, is a lot of bad lineups getting played. And you'll actually generally see that when reviewing the dime times in flashback here, the top ROI that is attainable in those contests will often be quite a bit lower. So we're seeing that the dime times top ROI from a 20 maxer in a 10% to first contest is actually like 10% lower than the solo shot, which is an 8% to first contest. They are deceptively hard. I don't love them. I think they are best used as if you are literally playing every single contest that opens under $3, fine, whatever. Or if you are very new to DFS and you just want to get the feeling of what it feels like to play a lot of entries, or if you're very new to using SaberSim or something like that, that's fine. They're not my favorite contest. But Raf says, I tend to personally avoid the $1 3 max and $3 single entry when the prize pool isn't where I want it to be. That's when I do the solo shot instead. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. As long as it's something you're thinking about. But yeah. All right. Okay. But let's take a look at some of these ROIs. We got to see a quick glance at it here in the dime time. And it looked pretty good. So we see positive 8% ROI here in the solo shot. Pretty good, pretty solid. Positive is always good there. Let's see if we see anything else in the quarter jukebox. So yeah, profitable here as well. Again, kind of a lot of variance slate to slate. I would not pick any given slate and think, why wasn't I top 5 or top 10 or whatever. My personal sim ROIs tend to bounce around a fair bit. But seeing positive always kind of means you're off to a good track. Seems like whatever you did in this dime time was like your best build of all of them, which is kind of funny. Like I would actually have assumed that would be the opposite, but it looks like your best set of lineups ended up in these dime time contests. So I guess we will see if there was anything different done in that build, or if it was just kind of random variance here. But let's take a look. All right. So can't reach desired exposures message, which is a little interesting. I wonder if there is an exposure set here. So we do have a couple small takes on a Mets stack. Small adjustment to the team total, up a quarter of a run. New York Yankees dropped almost a full run here. Let's see what else I'm seeing here before we kind of talk about this here. Build settings look pretty stock here. We are contest simming for each individual contest, running separate builds as well for each individual contest. I think that's great. Being aware of the fact that this can lead to you playing the same lineup into multiple contests. I think knowing that a big portion of your portfolio here is the dime time, I'm even less worried about that, because if a lineup sneaks into the dime and it's also in the solo shot, I don't feel too bad about that. But something to be aware of there. I do think, similar to the last portfolio we looked at here, this is a pretty substantial team total adjustment on the Yankees. I honestly, I feel weirdly more comfortable with a big adjustment to a team total in the negative direction than the positive direction, because you can almost justify fading any team on any baseball slate. Like, sometimes even for no reason other than like, I don't even want to play that team. That can sometimes be a good enough reason. And put a better way, it's unlikely that sinks you. When you make a big stand in the positive direction, you are making such a like positive investment into that team that affects your portfolio in just a more profound way, I guess. Like, say you left the Yankees alone and you had 20% even of them in your portfolio. Eliminating that, it's very easy to bring in other lineups that are perfectly fine built from other stacks. But when you make a big positive investment into a team, you are kind of making the claim that these lineups are profitable, or they are more profitable than all of the alternatives. It's like, in this case, you're fading the Yankees for the field. In the case from the other one we just looked at, you were basically fading the field for the Padres. Those are just two very different things. So I think this is a big um, team total adjustment, one that I think is a little large for my tastes. I would just be cognizant of that. If that is, Raf says, actual analytics to make this decision, that if it is the bigger your stand is that you are taking, I think the more confidently you should be able to back it up if you were like defending that to someone that wanted to know why, for example. So if you feel like you did, great. I mean, that's fine. And again, bumping up the Mets by a quarter of a run and giving them a 10% max exposure is totally fine here. Min Uniques is set pretty high, and when this loaded, we did see a can't reach desired exposures message, and the my lineups was stuck at 17. Sometimes when I pull these builds up from somebody else's build, it can get a little funky in terms of how this actually pulls up, and it looks like we are able to get 20 lineups just fine with 7 min uniques. So I think we were fine there. If we go to 8, we're still getting 8, but we break. Do we even break our exposures? We start to lose our exposures. So 7 is kind of like, yeah, I guess kind of one less than the max here. So I'm fine with that. Very well diversified overall. Looks pretty good. I would just be aware that this is a large team total adjustment. But again, I'm more comfortable with that in the negative direction of saying I just want to fade this team than go all in on them. Let me see if anything else jumps out here. Any other exposures? Anything else changed? Looks pretty straightforward here. I am going to take a look at this dime time build, see if anything else jumps out here, because the ROIs were just so much higher here that I'm curious if I can identify anything that was done here. Okay. Let's see. I assume like almost the same settings. Yeah, very similar settings overall here. This does seem to have broken again. I assume this was set at like 40. Okay. So it was probably something more like this. Gotcha. Yeah. So the Mets adjustment, it sounds like, was to fade Cole. Yeah. And I think this is kind of a good way of having done that. I'm curious if we look at your Mets leverage here, what that looked like. Let's see. Yeah, so a very low owned team playing against Garrett Cole, right? And I think this is kind of a good way. I think you probably actually, I would have been fine if you made this even a little bit um of a bigger stand if you wanted. The way that I tend to think about my stands is you kind of like think about where does that team fit into in the rest of the slate relative to ownership? Are they literally your favorite spot on the slate? Are they like a top 3 stack for you? Are they a top 5 stack? When you run your build, you go through your whole process. You run your contest sims if you're on Ultimate, you diversify with min uniques, and you kind of get to that point where you're like, okay, this is the stock build now. If I had no other decisions, this is probably what I would play. And then you start applying your research, doing things like that. At that point in the process, I tend to like to look at my leverage column and see um, what is my highest leverage play on the slate, right? What is my maximum leverage? So if it's for hitters, if your maximum leverage is say 12, 11, 10%, and your goal is to take a stand and it is your favorite play on the slate, the extent to which you should make the adjustment to the exposures is so that they become your highest leverage team, but no more than that, right? If that going above and beyond like 12, 15% leverage on your top team on the slate is probably overkill at that point. You didn't need, you're almost like just paying more variance to for no point at that point. That's kind of the way I think about it here. So and maybe the Mets were not like far and away your favorites like stack overall on the entire slate, but you might have had some room to make an adjustment bigger if you had wanted to. But that's the way that's how I think about my stand sizing, is get to that point in the build where you're like, okay, I could enter these lineups. I haven't applied any of my takes yet. And what does my leverage curve look like at that point after having diversified? And then that's kind of your parameters for making the adjustment. So I'm curious as well. So another good example here of this flipped the opposite direction is I would have potentially been more concerned about the adjustment made to the Yankees if we flipped the leverage to our biggest fades on the slate and saw that far and away our highest negative leverage team on the slate was Yankees bats, but it isn't. And that will generally be true when you take these stands, and when your stands are more about fades than plays, because it is harder for just fading a team completely, if you're assuming you're doing that, to be as big of a impact on your portfolio as having a giant positive stand on a team. So, all right, let's keep going here. We've got CJ 351 next up. Let me bring this down and we'll keep talking. Yeah, and talking about the stands and research and stuff is tricky because again, like I have the benefit of hindsight doing these. So I'm trying to be somewhat agnostic to that, and I really just want to make sure that you guys are thinking about where those are coming from, making the size of the stand in line with your confidence or the data you have backing it up, and that it's done in a way where your portfolio is not extremely fragile as a result of it, where possible. So, okay. All right. Let's see. I'll take a look again for CJ at the yesterday slate again, just because it's a little more recent. And we've talked about the 24th slate quite a bit. If it's particularly preferred for me to look at the 24th slate, that's fine, and I'd be happy to do that. But we will start here. So we've got yesterday's 6-game, the morning slate again. Let's see. So again, a similar thing here. Missing some of the low stakes single entry kind of stuff. I think I'm a little more comfortable with the idea of having not played those at all, knowing that this person is playing $290 on the slate. I've mentioned before in some of the content that like the line where I would consider not playing a contest is when it doesn't pay out at least what you're playing for the slate to first place. And on this particular slate, I actually think a lot of those $3 and under contests are that. So I'm fine with those being removed from the portfolio here. They could still be, dumped in potentially as a way to get into those contests. Even if you're just repeating the same lineup, just because like what a lineup will do for you in the solo shot versus if it is just duplicated into the daily dollar, for example, like your ROI is going to be so much higher having just thrown it in there. But it's kind of a minor thing here. Portfolio otherwise looks pretty good. I would say, okay, so one thing, we've talked a lot about this contest, this $3 150 max. Oh, have we processed any of these? Do we think all of these are still live? Oh no, they were good. These are tough. This is a tough contest. We talked a lot about this yesterday. But the $3 mega mini max that they post, you can see it just looking at the sim ROIs, is one of the toughest contests to be profitable in the lobby. This is one that is full of pretty strong 150 maxers taking up a ton of contest equity. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of bad lineups that get entered into this. You're competing against all of the pros. It's kind of like the mini flagship with less. Part of the reason the flagship works as a contest is because it is top heavy. And because it is top heavy, a lineup can have, by having a probability of winning first place, it can pay off its losses by having so much potential profit when the lineup banks the contest. This contest is almost the worst of both worlds, where it's just 10% to first against extremely tough competition. So you end up in a situation where you don't get a lot out of playing this contest. I don't know if a other slate was played here. It doesn't look like it, but if you are at that threshold of kind of starting to dump some money into this $3 mega mini max, I would consider taking that instead, that $150 or so there, spreading that out into some other slates where you can continue to play under the $3 threshold and just get that money down a little bit better. Because you see this, even if you are very good at this contest, and it seems like, I mean, having a positive ROI in this contest in 50 lineups is already great, right? That's already quite an achievement. You can see you are one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eighth overall out of unique users that played at least 50 lineups into this contest. The rake is 16% or whatever it is here. This is already a good sign, but you could probably have just done better with $150 into other slates spread out a little bit more. So I have been talking people off of this contest a little bit here this week, because I think it is a very challenging one to play and play successfully. Also very interesting to only see 60 lineups played into the 50 cent mini max. I assume that there's some reason for that. But it is weird to me to see 50 entries played into the mega mini max and only 60 into this mini max, right? It is a very interesting case study though here, right off the bat. So this, yeah, it looks like it was just a tough slate, to be honest. Pretty low ROIs in just the regular mini max as well here. This there's a spectrum of this smaller 50 cent mini max. Sometimes it is kind of low like this. Other times you will see it a little bit higher. But let's look at this one. I'm curious. Let's see. Equals 20. So kind of tough sledding on some of these slates here. These ROIs for even the best players were all a little bit lower for this slate. I wonder, and I haven't looked into this closely, but I wonder if the early slates are just consistently lower ROI across the board. I mean, I miss this slate, but I wonder like if just a slate kicking off at 10:05. I mean, I'm in Mountain Time here. A slate kicking off at 10:05. That's 9 a.m. West Coast. You just maybe miss a big portion of the pool that ends up playing bad lineups and pumping everyone's ROIs up, because all of the ROIs across the board for this slate look a little bit lower than I would say they normally do. But grading out as a percentile of the player base here, this user looks very good. I would say on the contest selection side, the main thing that stands out is I would consider having spread out this action, especially entered into this $3 150 max into some other slates. Looks like also playing FanDuel. So that's already a good start. I think playing some of the easier to beat contests on FanDuel is a good place to be putting that money instead of playing the $3 150 max. But rather than even continuing still to play this, I would have also spread it out into some other slates. And the main reason for that, I've mentioned it here this week, but you decorrelate your action on baseball DFS that day by playing it into showdowns or other slates that don't contain all of the games. That action is somewhat correlated to your results in the main slate because they share some games, but because they are not identical slates, it's slightly decorrelated. So the slate today and the slate tomorrow are perfectly uncorrelated. Your results in one have they don't have no effect on the other. Your results in, a night slate showdown or a 2-game turbo, of which is 2 games are also on the main slate, those are slightly related, but not perfectly. So it's almost like playing a different day of games to some extent. But let's take a look at the build here. So this is another one where I think almost certainly something did not totally port over well, because we're only loading 21 lineups with min unique stuck at 7. I imagine 21 lineups were not what was actually played here. But I'm assuming that this build, based on the fact that I'm only seeing one, I am assuming that this build was used to fill all of your entries here using a contest sim for each of the contests that you played. Okay, actually, I think that's probably what happened here. So the last sorting method that was selected was the chin music. So I assume the chin music risk adjusted return on investment was used to fill 21 of your lineups into some one of your last contests. So contest sim settings look good. I think it's probably best practice to be creating a contest sim for each of the entries that you're playing. I assume these trashed lineups down here, I have to do a little bit of investigative work to kind of reverse engineer what you were doing. I am assuming what these 90 lineups in the trash are lineups that were entered into a different contest. So it's like 90 lineups are being filled from one contest sim into a particular contest that they were simulated for and then deleted from the pool so they don't appear in another contest. I think that's totally fine. I think that's a good way to do it. So that looks good. The min uniques stuck at 7 makes a lot of sense for a 21 lineup pool. So for wherever these ended up going, presumably maybe they went into the, I don't know, what's the odd man out in terms of the contest sims that were run. Chin music, minimax, four seamer, quarter jukebox, solo shot. I don't know, but either way, the contest sim settings make a lot of sense to me here. Let me see if anything else has been kind of adjusted here. Nothing on the stacks or games or team totals. Yeah, I mean, looks like a pretty stock build, which I think is a good thing. Resembles very closely to my process overall. I like having seen a late swap here. It looks like there was some news that we got that did end up mattering on this slate. I saw Wilmer Flores in one of these lineups when I was first looking at it here with an outside. So a late swap was required. So I like to see that here. If nothing else, just as a way to account for those live slate contest sims. So that's great. Looks like probably had a little bit of a sweat when the slate was ongoing here. That maybe the Rangers and Bryce Johnson let you down a little bit, but that's a pretty high mid slate ROI here. So yeah, I mean, looks pretty good on the process. I would say takeaways here are pretty few. Maybe the big one being I would consider taking $150 you're dumping into the Mega Minimax, spreading that out into other slates. Maybe even just playing that into the smaller Minimax instead, knowing that the people that can enter that contest is a much more limited pool of generally weaker opponents. I do think it's interesting too, as well, just to look at this slate and just see that all of the ROIs across all the contests are a little bit lower. I have a hunch that those early slates are tougher than main slates because of the casual recreational audience that just doesn't enter it in time. I would not be surprised to see that show up more often, which is interesting. So yeah, looks pretty good. I like it. I don't really have a lot of feedback here on the actual build process. Looks like very similar to what I would have done. And I love that when I open this up, we're sorted by the leverage column too. I am regularly sorted by the leverage column here as a way to see what I'm kind of doing. So cool. All right, let's go to the next one here. We've got 2 more to get to here, and I've once again managed to review these in the most verbose way possible because we've gotten through 3 in about 49 minutes. But hopefully, this is helpful for you guys here. So looks like Chump here. Wow, Jordan, great stuff with this channel. First time seeing this. Is actually one that runs regular Saber Sim. I had Ultimate, but not profitable for me. Yeah, I mean, we reviewed the first one we started with here. It was somebody on the standard plan, has a positive Sim ROI in contest flashback. Had a few tips for that person's process, but looked like they were playing pretty soundly. In general, the kind of the way that I think we are thinking about this here is Ultimate starts to be very important to have and use, especially once you make the jump above the $3 threshold, or once you have kind of gotten that first 1K win and you have some sense of the typical ranges of outcomes of DFS, what it feels like to have a profitable season, because it feels a little bit different than people I think expect. It is not. It is losing most nights. To be honest, it's like profiting 5, 6, 7 times a month, playing every single day, and basically having one or two slates pay off the entire season. That is what a winning season of DFS ultimately feels like. And I think once you have gotten a win under your belt, or have gotten your bankroll to a point where you are making a bigger jump in stakes, that's where it really starts to make sense to play with contest sims. But I think you can absolutely be successful uh, on standard or pro at the lower stakes, or as you are getting started out. And then it gives you a little more runway as well on what your bankroll is doing. Like, I get it, 297 a month is expensive if you are mostly playing the low stakes anyway, right? Then it becomes, all of a sudden you have this barrier to what a profitable season looks like. It can be challenging to actually make that pay itself off. So I get it. It is nothing. It makes perfect sense to stick to the lower plans and rely on the tools that are available there, and basically beat up on the easy competition at the low stakes until you have a chance to grow the bankroll a little bit. So, all right. Let's we have Hammer next here. Let me get this one pulled up. We have Hammer, and we have J Ruck. And then that will probably be it here for today. Oh, let me close that here. One sec. My wife just got home. And I don't want to annoy her with me blathering about DFS stuff here down in my office. All right. Let's get J-Ruck's build pull up. Or, I'm sorry, let's get Hammer's build pull up. J-Ruck, you're next. All right. Let's see. All right, I'm gonna again bounce over to this slate here. This is the more recent one, but we've kind of already set the stage that I think this was a challenging slate to be profitable on, just by looking at those sim ROIs. But let's go ahead and take a look. All right, portfolio wise, pretty much nailed it. This is kind of what I would think is kind of the ideal low stakes portfolio. Dime time is fine. Again, just be aware that it's a little bit harder to beat. Your return for getting there is pretty low, but if you're throwing it in, it's all good. But this is pretty close to perfect of what I'm looking at here for somebody playing kind of the suite of available contests against the easiest competition in the DFS lobby here. So, Hammer said it was on beta. I don't think it matters. It should not make a difference. If anything looks obviously wrong here, you can let me know. But looks pretty good. Looks like at least at some point during the slate, you probably had a minimax sweat as well. Again, can't see exactly how that shaked out. I don't think. Oh, we can. So maybe I just need to be clicking into these. It looks like, dang, I shouldn't have even said that. That was probably mean of me to have even said that here. Because it looks like it didn't end up working out. But at some point, the app tagged your current winnings as $1,000. So, but yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to twist the knife there. I do love seeing the sim median profit and the sim 99th profit pinned over here on the left hand side. Those are like my two favorite columns to call out to people, and kind of just as a way to contextualize what the swings look like, what the average days look like, what the big win days look like. Very hard when you are losing to stay centered and kind of know what's normal. And this as the, hey, this is what's normal. And this column as the, hey, here's how it looks when it's right. I think it's helpful to contextualize things. So let me poke around here, see what we're seeing. Pretty decent ROIs here. Particularly good, I think, in this 20 max. Yeah, one of the better 20 maxers in the solo shot. Kind of like a break even ROI in the mini max, but again, a slate where being a 150 maxer in these contests was very difficult. Breaking even on your sim ROI in 150 here was good enough to basically be the 10th best 150 maxer in the entire pool. I assume probably like top 5 or top 10% of all the players that played this contest. Again, indicative of the fact that this was a tougher slate. And I think maybe these early slates can be a little bit tougher. So something to consider there. But contest selection looks good. Contest flashback at first glance here looks also pretty good. Let's take a look at the build. I am assuming that you are kind of live reacting to what I said here, but I am not sure at which parts. So, all right, let's see. I wonder if we're getting maybe the beta thing did actually have an impact here. Let me try to pull this down and see if I can fix this here. Um, I wonder if because it wasn't loading your lineups, so it's possible the beta did actually have an impact here. Let me try this again. Okay, no, I think I got it. Okay. Okay. Oh, have to remove the filters. Yeah, it looks like a contest sim maybe didn't port over well, so we lost a metric that's being used in the filter somehow. That's okay. All right. And yeah, okay. So now this looks like what the build presumably looked like here. So let's see what we're seeing. Similar. Okay. I'm not going to expose all of your metrics, but quite a few metrics in here. But it looks like for the purposes of filling the contest simming for a handful of like kind of representative contests for different buckets here is what it kind of appears like here. So we've got the solo shot, the mini max, the hot corner, the pickoff. I assume running those contest sims, filling contests that score the best in those contest sims into their respective contests. That's great. We see a high min uniques set here as well after using the filters. I assume that this is one less than the maximum. So that looks very good. I'm happy with that. Well diversified. Are we seeing anything else that jumps out in here? You've got my home run rule turned on, which is fun. I have full disclosure actually come off of this a little bit. I still think it's pretty good, and I think it's still sound. I think part of the reason I've come off of this is I realized there were two things. One, I think this is one of those things that just like feels better to do, but I actually don't know if it makes your lineups better. It's very easy to like say, okay, well, if I'm going to play a player that is a one-off, then I need them to have singular upside in the form of home runs, right? And that has kind of been my defense of this rule in the past. And I think that intuitively makes sense. But on the flip side, like one, the lineups you're getting from SaberSim, they banked the sims that they were built from. So the lineup has upside. And two, like if you're playing a 2K min salary player as a one-off in a lineup or something like that, that what that player needs to do for the lineup to be successful, or what that lineup's range of outcomes looks like in relation to that player, is just very different than a player than in a lineup that plays Corey Seager as a one-off. Like, yeah, sure, Corey Seager needs to probably hit a home run or have that 95th percentile outcome, which probably includes a home run as a one-off in a lineup. But if it was, random guy, that player doesn't need to do as much to make sense as a one-off. The other thing I've noticed that this rule does do, which is a bit of an unintended consequence of it, is it ends up finding you a lot of very well projected one-offs in games where a lot of scoring is projected, which is actually, I think, one of my least favorite way to play those spots. Like you'll get a lot of one-offs from random guys playing in Coors Field or something like that because they have a high home run odds. And Middling the chalky teams by playing small stacks or one-offing those teams, I think is one of my least favorite ways to play them. Like, I almost prefer to fade or to fully stack those teams up, and I think my rule is a little bit inclined to take you in the direction of playing one-offs from games where a lot of home runs are projected amongst players that maybe typically would not have those home run odds, and they kind of do just because of the circumstance. But if they get there, it's likely that the whole game's going off. Anyway, I stand by the rule, and I've mixed it in throughout this season. But full disclosure, I uh, I don't always use this now, and I've come off of this a little bit. So um, let's see. Anything else that's jumping out to me here? I don't see a lot of adjustments. Those exposures look great. Um, looks pretty straightforward. I am not seeing the self sim in your settings here. It looks like some of those contest sim settings didn't load in correctly. I think particularly maybe the self sims is what was showing up in the filter that kind of had just that is now missing. It's hard. I know you had mentioned you wanted to know if you were doing self sim correctly. It's hard for me to tell, but I assume so. If what you had done was also created, so the way it would have worked is like your self sim for the mini max, for example, would have still been this, but instead your field lineups is this build, and then your filter is for um the other contest sims ROI. So I am curious. I am going to expose you a little bit here. Since you are filtering by my ROI here. Oh, that's fine. That I think is just a different presentation of ROI. I thought maybe you were doing something creative with your filter, but that's fine. Yeah, I mean, it looks like you did the self sim correctly to me, based on kind of what I was able to see. So yeah, I mean, all things considered, looks pretty solid. I like nothing jumps out to me as a big mistake here. It's well diversified, contest sims being used correctly, a good overall portfolio, a good contest portfolio put together. You see, even in a slate that was very tough to be profitable, your ROIs look good. I see the late swap here that took place, which is great, staying on top of the news. Nothing that jumps out to me as any kind of mistake being made. Looks good. CJ's here. I only played 60 in the $1 mini because Andrew's thinking of only playing what 10th place plays. Gotcha. Okay, that's fine. I didn't. Yeah, if that's what if Andrew's recommended that, that's fine. I think everybody kind of has their own little way of thinking about contests. My little rule is not playing what doesn't pay out to first. What I'm playing on the slate. That's fine. Um, yeah. I'm curious. I'll have to talk to Andrew. I'm curious, kind of what his thinking is there. Um, I guess. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. I'll have to talk to Andrew. But I assume that's fine. All right. Let's get to Ruck's lineups here, and then we will probably get out of here for the weekend. But let's get to one more. And see what we have got. I know Ruck in particular mentioned in the asking for the lineups to be reviewed that they don't win very often. And I think it is very important to remember as we're doing this, no one does. That's the whole point, right? Nobody wins often. The profitable players, 6-7 days a month in the green, 1 to 2 slates a season that are represent 90% of your profit. That is why looking at the sim metrics, right? That again is why I like the sim median profit, sim 99th profit, right? Helps contextualize this quite a bit in terms of what expectations are here, right? These are the top 150 maxers in the mini max here. everyone is expected to lose money. Oh, you guys can't see my screen. Whoops. There it is. Top 150 maxers here. Actually, you know what? We don't even need to do top 150 maxers. I think we just do top ROI. Right? Top ROI lineups. They are all, even just looking at people that played a single lineup, everyone's average expectation is to lose money. So remember that, right? That's kind of the game. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're not doing anything right. I'm just noticing this for the first time here. It's kind of interesting also to see the Sim 99th profit for people that just played one lineup as kind of a defense of playing multiple lineups. That like the highest Sim 99th profit. Remember, this is for somebody's entire portfolio. Like so the highest. Yeah, this is actually really interesting. So Chad G, and I know this isn't exactly what I'm supposed to be doing here, but I just think this is interesting to look at. Chad G played 150 lineups. Sim ROI 4.4% in the portfolio here. Sim 99th profit, highest in the contest, $910. So that is the 1 out of 100 outcome that happens across the entire portfolio here. If we look at the highest Sim ROI individual unique user, it's somebody who just played a single lineup with a 23% ROI, right? Their Sim 99th profit is $3.25. That is the 1 out of 100 chance. That is basically manifested in this column here, the value of playing lineups, playing a lot of lineups, right? That is, you basically realize the actual ROI, the profit, more quickly. So now it doesn't it doesn't make sense to like, well, okay, yeah, sure. I'll instead of playing 50 cents into this contest, I'll play $75. Yeah, like, no, I'm not going to do that, right? Like bankroll is one thing, but if you are playing a single entry, I think yesterday we talked about somebody who was just dumping $18 as a single entry bullet into the flagship each night. And even if you're doing that profitably, your Sim 99th profit is never going to look like what it looks like to people, even probably playing 150 lineups into the mini max, which are two totally different contests. So anyway, let's look at this here and talk about this. So starting with the overall contest selection. So this, once again here, very challenging contest, comparatively speaking. Playing just the mini max, I'm going to be a bit of a hypocrite here. I do this all the time when I just want to get some action down in the slate and want to play something. I'll just dump 150 into the mini max, right? But I'm kind of doing that knowing I'm sacrificing something there. If your goal is bankroll growth, if your goal is building a bankroll, profiting as often as possible, building that up, this is not the best way to select contests at the low stakes, right? You should be playing the solo shot. You should be playing the quarter. You should be playing the daily dollar, the $3 single entry and 3 max, the $1 3 max, right? There's a lot more to play before basically dumping in $75 in the mini max. This is a tough contest. And the value of this contest is it is a way to get 150 entries in, or even 100 entries in, relatively cheaply, and it is better than basically every contest above the $3 entry fee. Barring maybe, I think there's a case to be made that the $4.20 max, especially when its overall prize pool is under 25K or whatever, might be a better investment than this one. But it's basically better than everything above that $3 entry fee. But this is almost the exact opposite of what you want to be doing. If you're playing the mini max, I think you're basically saying, I'm already playing everything else that's good under $3. This is the last one. Playing just this is almost like the opposite of what you kind of want to be doing here. So, but let's look at the build. And see what we can see here. All right. Handpicking stacks to some extent, Xing out a couple stacks, but mostly just like the very bottom of the barrel, totally fine. I'm actually even a little bit more picky with the stacks that I end up playing. I am interested. It seems like you are getting some pretty unique stacks here in your actual portfolio. I wonder if some of them have been locked in. It looks like we're making use of the lineup locking here. So, okay, definitely a couple things to look through here. Let's see. I'm going to kind of just poke around here and see what I'm seeing and then kind of give some thoughts. So we are doing some projection floor filtering here. It looks like kind of very light, basically just Xing out. This probably effectively just remove the players that are projected for 0 from your pool. So totally fine with that. That's not going to have a big impact here. Min and max exposures don't look like they have been messed around with too much, nor do the projections or team stacks or game stacks. Looks like we are doing the kind of the big, the full on contest sim. I've talked about this here on some of our other content here as a way of basically accounting for ownership variance in your contest sim by simulating your lineups against every field lineup we have, filtering by presumably all of them. Yeah. Looks like maybe a typo here. But filtering by all of them, and then kind of you have this less fragile pool as a result. Again, I think perfectly fine to do this. I know I have recommended it. I have found that I think the impact of actually doing this in terms of getting every single contest is a little bit lower than I expected. I think the most valuable thing is having the self sim in there. So for what it is worth, like continue to play around with it and experiment. But in my experience, the two that like really make a difference are the actual contest you are playing and the self sim, and then sorting by the self sim. And then all of the other ones end up not actually eliminating very many lineups. So, but let's take a look here what we're seeing. So yeah, J Ruck said edited some lineups to add in Logan Webb. So I would consider, huh. So at the very least, if you are going to edit lineups, I would run a contest sim again after you've edited them and make sure they're still profitable. I don't like the idea of lineup editing. It's there as kind of a control based feature. Like it's there for people that kind of really want that and basically ask us to be able to do that. But I don't love it. What I would have probably preferred is if you wanted 15% Logan Webb is to have just bumped up his exposure by 15%. Because then what you are doing at this point in the process is instead pulling in lineups where he actually appeared in a lineup that banked its sim. That's why it was in your pool and grades out as profitable by all these thresholds. And I think I don't know what your selection process looked like to identify a lineup that would then get Logan Webb, but I assume it was something about like just taking a handful of lineups and maybe just dumping him in, like where it kind of roughly fits salary wise. But I think a way to more profitably get Logan Webb into your portfolio would be to pull in profitable lineups that were built using the Sims in there. I think it exposes you to a lot of risk of not accidentally flipping a lineup and making it unprofitable to um sorry, I lost my train of thought there. To just pull in the lineups from the Sims where he makes sense. So yeah, Ruck says basically I was getting a ton of Chris Bassett. Is that yeah? Chris Bassett wanted to edit some lineups where I had the salary to get on Webb. Yeah, and I think rather than doing those as 1-for-1 swaps or thinking about it that way, I would have just done that with the exposures. Because when you do it with the exposures, again, you're kind of pulling in the best versions of Logan Webb lineups. That's probably the best way I could put this. Is when you edit lineups and say I want to get up to 15% Logan Webb, so I'm just going to edit lineups until I get there. You don't know if this is the best way you could have gotten your Logan Webb exposure. But when you set a minimum exposure and you're sorted by your ROI and you've diversified and all of this, then you're pulling in the best versions of those Logan Webb lineups. And if you can't reach that desired exposure, like literally your build's like we can't get there, at that point you are basically disagreeing with the projection, which is again fine if you have a strong reason to believe that. Then adjust the projection, rebuild the pool, and basically say no, SaberSim, you're wrong. His actual projection is 15.5 points, or that's what a fair projection for him is. Now rebuild the pool, rerun my contest sim. And I think what you will do is, again, just making sure that you are playing the best version of the lineups that you can on the stands that you intend to take for the slate. There are a few features in the SaberSim app that, to be totally honest, are there because they are asked for. And I actually struggle to come up with a good use case for using them almost ever. And I think one of those is lineup editing. I have never once edited a lineup, and I don't think I ever will. And it is there because before it was built, it was the number one asked for thing. So I think people that are familiar with hand building lineups, it is very easy to build out a pool of lineups and pick one that's kind of close to something you would hand build, and then edit the way there. And I think that um, process can make sense to people that are more familiar with hand building. But again, from a standpoint of maximizing your bankroll, maximizing profit, playing in the most sound playing with the most sound principles, I don't think I would do it because there's a better way to get your exposure. So but enough on that. Otherwise, things look pretty good. Let's see. I don't see much else that is jumping out to me here. It looks like a very stock process. Uh, Again, stock being a positive word here, I think that is a very good thing. When I pull up one of these that looks kind of stock, I think that's a good thing, with a stand taken on Logan Webb. And I would just change basically the tool you are using to take that stand. But otherwise looks good. And of course, the contest selection thing. I think this is the big one. Yeah. So again, if you're coming at this like, Jordan, I like the mini max and I'm going to play it until I'm going to play it forever. I just like it. It's fine. But again, profit as your North Star, you can do better than 100 entries there. Quite a bit better, actually. This is consistently tough. Let's bounce back here as we start to wrap up just to the 24th, because this early slate that we were looking at yesterday just looked so challenging that I don't think it's indicative here of like really what we might have seen on a typical main slate. So let's find our mini max. So let's see. Okay. So 150 max, the mini max on the July 24th slate. Your maximum achievable ROI was about 5%. If we look at let's find something comparable. Let's look at the solo shot, which is 8% to first. So our expectation is that the highest achievable ROI should theoretically be lower. And we see 20 lineups played into this contest. Your maximum ROI that is available to you is 28%. Let's look at some of the other low stakes stuff. In the pickoff, the $3 single entry, 65% achievable ROI. Let's look at what else? Quarter jukebox. And I'm using the term achievable ROI as basically the top ROI player amongst somebody that maxed the contest out. And I'm saying that like there's literally a higher theoretical top ROI portfolio you could have built, but amongst people that actually played, this was the highest ROI that was observable. In the quarter jukebox, 26% ROI. So again, like, especially if you're kind of around this range of bankroll investments, say $50 or so, there's so many better contests to play. And a lot of these contests are still going to pay out pretty well. I know the quarter jukebox, the daily dollar, some of these contests don't have the most attractive prize to first, but they are more beatable. They are bankroll builders. They are ways you can play DFS in a more sustainable way. The solo shot does have a pretty good prize pool most of the time. So if you want that 1K to first sweat, and if having a sweat is important to you, if playing for 100, 250, $500 contests as the main part of your portfolio each night just isn't going to move the needle for you, then set aside some entertainment expense DFS money and put it into a contest that does mean something to you, whether that's like a higher stakes single entry or even a medium stakes single entry, or if you want to just throw a lineup into the flagship and have a little bit more fun picking that lineup out, and you are treating that as separate and you're saying this is entertainment expense and this is fun and this is kind of what makes it all kind of like that sweat part is fun, but I have this part of I'm investing the main portion of my bankroll that I'm playing for that slate into intentional high ROI contests, then do it that way, right? That's fine too. But don't let that kind of like sweat feeling, that sweat need that I've felt, I'm sure everybody has felt, change the way that you are playing night to night for the majority of your action. So, Ruck said I changed the contest selection for tonight. Great. That means I've harped on it for long enough. Will's here as well. It was a different time when we wanted to edit lineups. I never wanted to edit lineups. So, I don't know. That was never me. And I'm sorry if anybody. I'm sure there's people in chat that that love that feature. And again, that's why it's there. If you like it, good for you. I think there's almost always a better way to have done the thing that you did when you edited a lineup. So, Ruck said, so if you had a 3K bankroll, what would you play nightly? $150 or so, somewhere between 75 to $150. Yeah, I mean, let's do that. Here, let's look at tonight. So, actually, let me pull this down for a second, and I'll log into my account. This will be where we leave things off for today. But I'll kind of show you how I would have selected contests for tonight with a 3K bankroll. So first of all, that'd be 5% of that bankroll is $150, 2.5 is $75. So I'd be somewhere in that range, depending on your level of comfort, depending on one, your level of comfort with how much you're willing to get down. Two, how diversified you tend to play. The more diversified, the more comfortable I'd be playing more. And then maybe as the last piece there, how comfortable you are with the slate. For me, there's nothing that makes me generally more or less comfortable with the slate than weather. I won't have big stands to take on almost any given slate. But if I open up the Roth dashboard first thing in the morning and it looks like it's a weather slate, I will play less. So weather slate being like 2-3 games that have weather, like one game is fine, I think, to work around, but that's where. Okay, so anyway, let's see what's out there. So the way I would probably enter this is you actually can. I kind of wish we had an option to show percent to first as a dollar amount, because then we could do a pretty cool filter here with like filtering out a bunch of the contests at the bottom that don't pay out at least $150 to first. But we can't do that. So what I would play $3 into the strike 3. I would play dollar here. I'd play the pickoff, the hot corner, the quarter jukebox, the solo shot. So let me do this real quick. So 25, that's 34, 37, 38, 41. Then I'd actually probably just play the minimax. It just so happens that I think at that bankroll is like right around the point where you're basically maxing out the low stakes. That's probably what I would do. So there's nothing, I guess, at that bankroll. Like, again, certainly nothing wrong with playing the mini max. Again, I think it is the best contest you can play before you have to make the jump above. And then if you do, the bankroll grows, you have a couple wins. What do you do next? I would actually branch out and play in the soft contest on FanDuel next, or playing night slates, playing showdowns, playing turbos, again under the $3 threshold. Then once you are playing all of that, filling in all of the under $3 stuff, then you can start to make the jump above the stake. Then you can make the jump above stakes and to get enough action down. That would kind of be my plan of attack. I've never been a big fan of these table setters. They are dime time-esque to me, where like your number of effective entrants here is so low. There's no casuals in this contest. They're just tough. So I have experimented with them. I don't like them personally. So it's kind of your main contest, your bread and butter. So we were at like 39 plus 75 puts you right around that correct range of where I would end up playing. So, and every sport hits that threshold differently. It just so happens that I think baseball's around like $150 is all of a sudden you're basically a low stakes maxer. In NFL, it's way more. In NBA, it's more too. I think you need to have like 300 down each night to kind of fill in the low stakes stuff. So, and then last question here: do you personally make a new build for your single entry or use one main build? Post contest sims, like since contest sims have been out, I end up building everything all together because the contest sims will just identify good lineups from your pool for each contest that you're playing. And I don't think you this I think this I think having contest sims makes the sliders a lot less important. So I do everything together. If you're on standard or pro, I think then there's a better argument to building separately for single entry and 3 max versus your 20 max and 150 because you're not going to have that contest sim backstop identifying the best lineup out of your pool for a single entry. So you kind of want all of your lineups in your pool to be a little bit better for single entry. But if you're contest simming, I think it's fine to do everything together. And that's what I tend to do. So, okay, we're going to cap things off there. That will do it for today. Thank you again for everybody joining me here. Good luck in the main slate tonight. We will be back doing this again on Monday afternoon. Probably shoot for the same time period, 5 o'clock Eastern. I saw at least one person already registered to have their build reviewed on Monday. I think that was Sick Hemi. If you want me to review your build portfolio live on stream on Monday, please post your username in the Office Hours channel in our Discord server. There should be a link to join the Discord if by chance you are not in it already in the description of this stream on YouTube. Yeah, have a good weekend, everybody. Good luck, and we will see you on Monday. See ya.